On August 6, 2025, the skies over Samir, just 15 miles from the NATO border, seemed calm, but in an instant, they erupted in flames. Russia had unleashed 3 Iskander ballistic missiles, along with 53 suicide drones, a strike package worth more than $120 million, all aimed at a single Ukrainian base. If successful, the attack could wipe out over 4,000 troops, the entire fuel supply depot, and the command system in the blink of an eye. At first glance, it looked unstoppable. The drones roared across the horizon, skimming treetops at deadly speed, while the Iskanders plunged from the stratosphere at Mach 6. Any force caught under this storm of steel would be crushed. But Ukraine in 2025 was no longer the Ukraine of the war's early days. Hidden deep underground Ukraine's secret radar arrays had been tracking every signal, every trajectory. This wasn't a hasty reaction. It was the result of weeks of preparation, calculation, and silent simulation. And when the decisive moment came, the entire Ukrainian defense network lit up. From concealed launch pads, bayonet interceptor drones took to the skies. Flying in pairs, they tore into Russia's swarm, colliding at breakneck speeds and exploding into fiery spheres. In just 5 minutes, all 53 suicide drones were annihilated. Not a single one made it through. Above the sky lit up as Patriot PAC-3 missiles screamed upward, carving bright white trails through the clouds. 3 interceptors hit all 3 Iskanders at 25,000 feet, shattering them into blazing debris that rained harmlessly across empty fields. Ukraine had just stopped one of Russia's most expensive and lethal strike packages ever launched. In the underground command bunker, the Ukrainian general stood tall, his voice booming through loudspeakers. "We are not here only to defend. We will turn every Russian attack into their own graveyard." But the greatest surprise wasn't Ukraine's miraculous survival. On August 7, 2025, instead of launching the large-scale counter-offensive NATO expected, Ukraine's high command chose an ancient yet deadly strategy: guerrilla warfare. Small teams of just 3 to 5 soldiers slipped deep into enemy territory. Armed with light anti-tank weapons, silenced rifles, and a handful of explosives, their mission wasn't to seize ground, but to spread fear. One midnight near Novovolinsk, a Russian supply convoy of 12 fuel trucks stumbled into an ambush. In 90 seconds, 3 trucks were engulfed in flames and the rest scattered in panic. Before Russian forces could respond, the Ukrainian unit had melted into the darkness. By dawn, a Russian communications hub was struck, silencing battlefield radios for hours. Elsewhere, a Russian patrol simply vanished without a trace. Sudden explosions, lone sniper shots, lightning raids together, they became a relentless rhythm of dread. These were no longer conventional battles. They were psychological knives twisting deep into Russia's ranks. At any moment, anywhere, a convoy, a command post, even a small guard unit could become the next target. Western Ukraine had turned into a phantom battlefield. Russian troops were no longer fighting a traditional army, but hundreds of invisible shadows, Ukrainian guerrilla fighters who battled not for immediate victory, but to bleed away morale, sow chaos, and transform every captured inch of land into the graveyard of the invader's spirit. Russian soldiers began to fear the silence between battles more than the firefights themselves. By the 7th day, Russian formations had collapsed into chaos. UAV reconnaissance footage from Ukraine showed platoons unwilling to leave their trenches at night, while others fired wildly into the darkness, wasting thousands of rounds on phantoms that did not exist. The cost was devastating. Ukrainian intelligence estimated that 60% of Russia's combat effectiveness in the sector had been neutralized not through head-on battles, but through exhaustion, confusion, and fear. What had begun as a bold gamble by Ukrainian commanders had turned into a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. Russia, with all its massive firepower, suddenly realized it no longer controlled the battlefield. And after the small strikes, the inevitable came a full-scale counteroffensive. On August 13, 2025, at 5:40 a.m., after a week of relentless guerrilla attacks, the Ukrainian president gave the order to strike back. The signal was sent from Kyiv, and within minutes the skies over western Ukraine roared with the thunder of engines. From hidden makeshift airstrips and even converted farmland, 300 low-cost suicide drones took off in swarms. Each drone weighed just 55 pounds, carried a 15-pound warhead, and used a cheap GPS system paired with a small camera. Weak on their own, but together they formed a storm of destruction. Assembled in less than 24 hours with 3D printed frames, commercial lithium batteries, and off-the-shelf processors, they embodied a simple philosophy: overwhelm with numbers, not cost. The swarm descended on the Russian base near Samir, where more than 2,000 soldiers, tanks, and supply depots were concentrated. Russian air defenses lit up firing missiles worth millions at drones that cost almost nothing. But for every drone shot down, 5 more broke through. Within minutes, Russian fuel depots exploded like volcanoes, artillery positions erupted in flames, and an entire row of T-72 tanks was reduced to twisted burning steel. But then disaster nearly struck. 5 drones lost GPS guidance due to Russian jamming and veered toward a Ukrainian artillery battery with 120 men and 6 self-propelled howitzers. If they had struck, the losses would have been catastrophic. At the last moment, Ukraine's ECCM electronic countermeasures activated. Portable transmitters switched frequencies, seizing control of the drones. With a single burst of new coordinates, the rogue drones turned diving instead into a Russian ammunition depot. The resulting blast created a fireball dozens of meters high, saving Ukraine's artillery and turning disaster into triumph. Seconds later, 30 self-propelled guns opened fire, launching precision shells guided by reconnaissance drones. Explosions tore through the remaining Russian armor. Overhead, 20 UAVs streamed live imagery directing the next wave of suicide drones. They struck like predators, locking onto Russian troops in trenches and open fields, obliterating them in bursts of smoke and shrapnel. Panic spread. Russian soldiers fled in all directions with no shelter left to hide in. Some tried to hold out inside warehouses, only to be torn apart by swarms of mini drones crashing through the rooftops. At the western tree line, survivors attempting to escape were relentlessly tracked their positions, transmitted to advancing Ukrainian infantry. Within an hour, those groups were either annihilated or forced to surrender. By noon, nearly 300 Russian soldiers laid down their arms. The blue and yellow flag of Ukraine once again flew over territory that had been seized. The guerrillas had worn them down, the drones had crushed them, and now the infantry had finished the hunt. But the campaign was not over. At dawn on August 15, 2025, Ukrainian radar picked up 10 Russian Su-34s and Su-35s, closing in at nearly 600 net ph, each armed with guided bombs capable of leveling the entire base. Moscow wanted revenge. Sirens wailed, soldiers dove into bunkers. But what Russia didn't know was that Ukraine had secretly deployed Patriot PAC-3 batteries around the base overnight. In just 2 minutes, 7 Patriots streaked into the sky, leaving white trails across the morning light. One by one, Russian jets exploded into fireballs, crashing into the forests below. Of the 10 aircraft, 7 were destroyed. The remaining three panicked, jettisoned their bombs into empty fields, and retreated back into Russian airspace. This was more than a victory. It was a devastating blow to Russia's illusion of invincibility. In just 72 hours, Ukraine had transformed from defender to hunter, turning Russia from attacker into the humiliated aggressor. The Battle of Samir will be remembered forever, where intellect, determination, and improvised technology triumphed over the costly firepower of a superpower. Ukraine had not only survived, it was rewriting the art of modern war. If you believe this story deserves to be heard by the world, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel now. The journey ahead holds more secrets and even deadlier battles yet to come.